Hey there, it's Kimberly here with Knit for Brains, and today we're going to be talking about the knitting and the crocheting trends for 2025. So you're not going to want to miss this episode. Hey there, welcome to my channel. This is Kimberly with Knit for Brains, and I wanted to talk to you about some of the things that are going to be sticking around in 2025 as far as knitting and crocheting, and some new things. So I did a little bit of research, and one thing I'm really happy to say is that granny squares are still going to be huge. As a matter of fact, we're going to be looking at granny squares kind of from a modern trend. So not just your traditional granny square, but there's a lot of different options for granny squares. So when we're talking about granny squares, the traditional ones still hold true, but there's a lot of different options. This is one of my favorite books on granny squares, A Modern Guide to Granny Squares. And I've used this thing so many times. There's just a bunch of there's baubles, there's rainbows, there's a solid granny square. Things that almost don't even look like granny squares. So granny squares are still going to be a thing, but maybe changing it up a little bit. So finding a book that you can probably get this at your local library as well, but just finding a little bit of a different twist or spin on granny squares is going to be the big thing. A lot of home decor items are also going to be really popular. This book, for instance, gives you not just granny squares, but different ways to incorporate them. This is a wall hanging, a pillow, and just a regular blanket. So different ways to incorporate granny squares. I love granny squares, and I've done a lot with them, but this one here, this is great. It gives you a little bit of a ruffle. So just think granny squares, but then think outside the granny square box. Another thing that's going to be big is the modern granny stitch. So not necessarily a square, but things that you can do in the rows with the granny stitch. This book here is all kinds of vests and sweaters and really, really fun accessory items that you can make using granny squares and or granny stitches. So that's also going to be a really big thing. The Pantone color of the year is called Mocha, and it's a beautiful kind of an earthy, warm, think like hot chocolate color. But the trend is to be coming in with some different colors to incorporate into that. So the color itself is called Mocha Mousse. It's an earthy brown shade, and it celebrates warmth and the desire for comfort with the richness of like a coffee and a cocoa. You can see the color here. The shade is a trendsetter for the year and allows experimentation with colors. So for instance, you can actually start with that brown and then you can move into some other colors. This one here, it's called Visions, and it's by We Crochet. You can see how it's bringing in a lot of the mochas and the browns, but it's bringing in a lot of like the aquas and the pinks and bringing in different pops of color. So whether you've got a variegated yarn that does it by itself and brings in these nice warm colors to complement that mocha, or you just do it yourself and add in color, the idea is to have this nice warmth and comfort color, but at the same time adding in these pops of color. The big thing that's happening right now as well is the pops of neon pink or lime green. Yellows and blues are really trendy, so this is absolutely perfect. Ombres, monochromes, gradient yarns, variegated skeins, which we have known for a long time. We've been playing with those for a really long time. Hand-dyed yarns are also gaining popularity with all the independent dyers that are out and about now. So anything that's kind of tying in with those earth tones and then throwing in some really pretty pops of color, that's going to be really big this year. Another thing that's happening, and I'm really excited to see this, is what we call the slow fashion and upcycling. So as you all know, this year my challenge to myself is not to buy new yarn and use up the stash that I've got. A lot of the yarn companies nowadays are coming out with this upcycled idea where you take yarn rather than ending in a landfill and you actually recycle it into a new yarn. So it's not just a natural fiber, but it's actually a recycled fiber. So for instance, Patons just came out with this one. This is called Evermore. And this is it's really pretty. It's got a little bit of a tweed going through it. It is 90% recycled wool and then 10% polyester. So it's a wool, it's got a little bit of polyester, but it is recycled. So I think it comes from other garments, other skeins of yarn that would have ended up in a landfill, and then they recycle it. So this is a big trend right now. This again is coming in from Patents, and this one is called Grape Tweed, and it does have a little bit of a tweed going on in there. So I'm really excited to give this one a try. This I purchased in 2024, even though it might have just shown up in 2025. But this recycled idea. There's a couple other brands that are doing that. Lion's brand is doing one that they've been doing for a while. It's called Respect. And I don't know that I have a skein of it with me, but it's basically a recycled yarn. So last year, We Crochet came out with this yarn that became one of my favorites, and it's called the Upcycled Alpaca Blend. And this had a lot of different like jewel tones and blues and greens, but a lot of really earthy colors here. This one here is called Salmon. It's a sports weight. It comes in at 273 yards, and I love this, and I bought up like everything they had. I did find out from the company that they are going to be bringing this back because it was really initially a limited edition, but it was so popular that they decided to keep it in their lineup of yarns and fibers, but they're going to be bringing out some more colors, more of the jewel tones, and bringing some of the popular ones back, but then bringing in some new colors. So I'm excited to see what that's going to look like. This is 33% alpaca, 34% wool, and 33% acrylic. So it washes up really well, but it's got that alpaca and the wool, but it's upcycled. So again, they're taking something old and making it new and or better. And that's kind of my theme. And you'll find there's a lot of other things I'm doing here on this channel, not only crochet and knitting, I'm also going to be doing some weaving. There's a term that they have in Japan called the wabi-sabi, which basically means you take something that is old and you either make it as good or better than the original garment. They would take old like kimonos, and they would cut them into strips, and then they would weave them into new garments of clothing because they couldn't afford to go out and buy new clothing. So it's sort of that idea of renew, reuse, and re-up. And a lot of the yarn companies are coming out and doing that. I'm really excited. Here's another yarn that We Crochet launched in 2024, and I brought this to you back then, and I love it. It's called Selvage. It comes in at a sports weight. This color here is called Thrift Shop. It's kind of a celery color. It's 95% cotton, and then it says it's 62 to 75% recycled cotton, and then 5% other fiber. So if it's 95% cotton, 75 up to 75% of that is recycled, and that might mean that they grab another skein of yarn or something like that that would have ended up in a landfill that was just, maybe it was bits of yarn, I'm not really sure. But then they recycle it into it. So this one here is called Thrift. They had some really fun colors. This one was one of my favorites, and it's called Farmer's Market. This great apple green color. So I'm definitely going to be doing something with these. I'm not sure what yet, but it's pretty soft. It is, like I said, it's mostly a cotton, so it's going to be good for like a summer top, something cool, maybe warmer weather, a nice, cool, airy top. So I'm looking forward to this guy here. One trend that I'm really excited about, it kind of just totally speaks to me, is what we call multi-craft technique projects. So, and I'll be doing this on my channel. The idea is that you combine like knitting and crocheting. Maybe this is a crochet top, and maybe you add like a knitted piece to it, or you do some parts in knit and then some parts in crochet. Or also like weaving and incorporating like a crochet piece into the weaving technique, which I'm really excited about because you guys know that I'm going to be doing some weaving on this channel. I'm going to be taking a weaving course, Dressing the Loom, with Chris Acton of Acton Creative. So I can learn how to get it from step one over to the loom. I can do it on a floor loom or on a rigid heddle loom. So I want to be incorporating weaving, and even that wabi-sabi weaving that I was talking about. Taking like old silk dresses or silk ties and cutting them into pieces and then incorporating that into my weaving projects or my knit and crochet. I saw a girl the other day who was taking strips of fabric and she was knitting them into a garment, and it was awesome. Absolutely awesome. So the idea of where you're taking multi-crafts and multi-textures and kind of incorporating them all together is going to be really big. Again, it's going back to this whole reuse, recycle, renew. People are like, let's pay attention to our environment. Let's not, waste as much. And so I love this idea of like the thrift shop idea, bringing things back around, applique, cross stitch, embroidery, and beadwork are also going to be incorporated into a lot of projects. So I'm super excited about that. Accessories, so smaller pieces, which again, I'm really excited, are going to be taking center stage. So market bags or phone cases or jewelry, pieces like bracelets and necklaces, water ball bags or water bottle bags, little gifty items and things like that are going to be taking center stage, which I'm excited. So great stash busters. If you have one skein of this or a half a skein of that, you'll be able to make something super fun and, colorful. And again, using up, not throwing away those scraps, using up, renewing, and recycling. Working with sustainable and natural fibers is also going to be playing a big part. Not just the recycled, but your natural fibers. So maybe incorporating a little bit of acrylic, but also really using the cottons and the linens. So for instance, this is a Knit Picks yarn that they brought out in 2024. It's called Gossi. This is called Grape Drink, and it is 65% cupro and 35% fine merino wool. So the cupro is a cotton, I believe, but it's really, really, really soft. Lion's brand. Now this is one of my favorites. It's been out for a little while. It came out, well, I knew about it last year. This is the cotton, bamboo, and linen, and it is so soft. It has a look of cotton, that kind of nubby look, but it's really, really soft because of the bamboo. The linen is going to give it the structure, but the bamboo is going to keep that linen from getting too scratchy. This one here is 40% cotton, 35% bamboo, and 25% linen. So almost a three-way split across the board. But it's mostly the cotton, which is going to give you, the affordability, and also the wash and wear. Bamboo, often when you're crocheting or knitting with it, it tends to be very heavy and real slippery, and so it tends to lose its shape. So having the cotton and the linen into the mixture is going to help to give it that structure, and so when your garments aren't going to just hang and start to lose their shape. So any of your natural fibers, again, your cottons, your silks, your merino wools, the bamboos, different things like that are really going to be taking center stage. So I'm super excited because I have a big old stash of all of that kind of yarn. So I was a little nervous when I made the challenge for myself that I wasn't going to be buying any new yarn, that I'd be missing out and there'd be all this great stuff. Well, as it turns out, I've got a lot of really cool, fun yarns, and most of them are natural fibers. They're also going to be doing a lot of gender inclusive patterns, which basically just means it's going to be a little bit more of a boxy fit. Not as fitted, but that it can really sort of incorporate and accommodate and celebrate, a gender neutral style. So more of the boxy sweaters, knitting and crocheting, scarves, hats, that kind of stuff. But really is the sweaters are not going to be quite as fitted. This one here I made, it's got a little bit of a bell sleeve. So this is a little bit more on the feminine side, but just that sort of, like the boyfriend sweater, that's going to be a really big deal this year. Retro or vintage designs. And again, I love that we're kind of going backwards a little bit, right? Like we're celebrating where we came from, right? Using the natural fibers, using that thrift shop vintage idea. And I've got some great books for that. One of which is called Filet Crochet. And I told myself this was going to be something that I was going to learn how to do at some point. So I think 2025 is a great time to do it. Filet crochet is a real vintage. When I say real vintage, it started like in the 1800s, early 1900s. And you can see there's just a lot of very intricate designs. So think when you're thinking filet crochet, think like tablecloths, lace curtains, really fine that your great or your great grandmother used to do as far as the linen and the lace crochet or knitting. But filet crochet has kind of come a long way. So there's actually, this is a great book that I have. And it talks, there's a lot of modern designs too. And you don't have to be doing, like a 0.1 size hook. You can actually use some bigger yarns. You don't have to be using your lace weight or your threads to make these really cute and fun designs. So that's going to be big. As I mentioned, granny squares are going to be really big. Irish lace is kind of coming back. I don't know if I'm going to get into that one as much. Vintage stripes, chevron patterns. Everybody remembers our grandmother made chevron Afghans. And I actually have not tried the chevron pattern, so I'm excited to try that. You can do it in crochet and or knit. Plaids are also making a comeback. So intimate, like bikini wear, accessories, and clothing, all the way up to like dresses or blankets or pillows or home decor. All of these are going to be coming in from that vintage style. I think what's really happening too is that they've finally started realizing what we've known all along, which is crafting is therapy. Knitting, crocheting, weaving, they find that it's almost a meditative activity. It lowers people's blood pressure. It helps with, depression or anxiety, or it has a very calming effect. And so they're really finding that to be the case. I don't know if it started with COVID. I don't know when it started, but it's really kind of becoming a thing. So you find a lot of people are doing it. One thing I think is really interesting and exciting is that I see a lot of younger people that are getting into crocheting, and so it's not so much your grandmother's craft anymore. It's hip and trendy to make your own clothes. Case in point. To use up the recycled yarns, to learn this really great and just to sit and enjoy and be present in the moment when you're creating something that's really amazing. So I'm really excited about the things that are coming out. And of course, amigurumi is still going to be out there. It's going to be making a big splash. A lot of people are not really into amigurumi, and that is totally fine. I am probably one of those people. I am more of a garment person than I am into amigurumi. However, y'all know I did get this book last year at the end of 2024, and I was so excited because I love the Muppets. Love them. So my goal is to make I think there's 13 patterns in this book. So my goal is to make one a month. And except for I'm making Beaker and Dr. Honeydew Bunsen, I think I'm gonna make them together because they came together in this set. So here's Honeydew Bunsen. Is that right? Is that his name? Let me see. Dr. Bunsen Honeydew. I was close. So this guy and Beaker were always side by side, and there's 13 patterns. So what I'll probably do is make Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker together. That's where I'm just probably going to start because they're my favorites. And then I'm going to go on from there. Love it. So definitely you're going to be seeing some amigurumi coming out of this channel, out of this girl, along with the natural fibers and all the fun colors and things like that. So if you want to know about some of the stitches and you're not really sure, how to do these, but maybe you want to dabble in it, these two, I featured these two last year. This is the Crochet Stitch deck of cards, and this one is the Knitting Stitches deck of cards. Both of these are available on Amazon. I will include the link to my Amazon store. You can see these. I did a review on both of these, and I've used both of these decks, and I love them. Basically, with this one here, this particular sweater that I made, I knew the yarn that I had, but I wasn't really sure. And I went in and I looked at the different patterns, and I found this one here, which is called the Iris Stitch. And it had all the instructions here on the back. And it doesn't necessarily give you a pattern. It just basically says, here's how you do the stitch and the repeats of the stitch. And what you decide to do with it is totally up to you. So I took this card here, and then I just made this sweater with this cowl. And I loved it. So when I saw the knitting stitches, I was very excited. So if you want to just like, hey, I want to try a new stitch, or I want to try some knitting and try my hand because I'm really a crocheter, these are great ways to start because it's vast. I mean, all the information that you need, and there's so many stitches. There's 52 stitches or cards, basically. Each card represents a stitch in each deck. Both of them have 52. This is the knitting, and then it gives you the little booklet on the front that tells you, how to knit if you've never done it before, the step-by-step instructions, how to do cables. It's just a nice little package that it's all together. And then it's broken out into, the different kinds of stitches, whether you're going to have like a drop stitch and slip stitch patterns or lace and stitch. It gives you everything in here, and they're all color-coded across the top. So you can see what kind of stitches. So if you just kind of want to, dip your toes in, this is a great way to do it, I think. So this was the Knitting Stitches by Claire Crompton. Learn to knit texture in 52 cards. And this one here is by Esme Crick, which love her. She did the Modern Blanket book that I had in 2023, I think it was. And then she wrote this. So this kind of ties in a lot to the book that she did, the Modern Crochet Stitches. But it gives you all the instructions here. So these are great to just add to your arsenal if you just want to, try something new and check it out. And a couple of the other things that are coming around big is the idea of yarn painting or doing other things with yarn other than knitting, other than crocheting. So there's the weaving, which we talked about. Punch needle is something that's kind of big. I've dabbled in it. I've got some pieces, some tools for punch knitting. I might dabble in it a little bit more, but this book was pretty interesting. It's called Yarn Painting. So the idea with this is that you take the yarn, and this would be a great stash buster, and you basically make pictures, and I think you just use the yarn and then you glue it down. I think that's pretty amazing. This picture right here, this is actually a yarn painting, and it's gorgeous. It's a masterpiece. It's very detailed. So, but even if you want to start with something really simple like this, that's really fun. And you just trace the design onto your palette, whether it's a piece of wood or a canvas or whatever, and then you just kind of go from there. So I got this book from Leisure Arts. I'll include the link as well, but I'm excited to check this out and maybe even use some yarn stashes. And if you just want some inspiration, maybe some home decor or just some really tiny little stash buster ideas, this book here called Yarn Crafts, I also got on Leisure Craft, and I loved this one. And it's got like a pom-pom pillow or even a wall hanging. That might actually be a wall hanging. It is. It's exactly what it is. It's a wall hanging. Yarn wrapped bottles. How fun is that? Talk about a scrap buster. I mean, that's easy. Feather on canvas. So if you just want some like really fun, unique ideas, here's some weaving. So here's a woven placemat. So this kind of crosses the barrier between even this. That's interesting. Crosses the barrier. You can do knit, crochet, weaving, just ways to use up yarn and not be tossing it. So that's kind of the theme that I'm seeing going on is reuse, recycle, renew, whether it's going to be in your yarn, using up your stash, and different ways that you can go ahead and do that. Because we all know that working with yarn, no matter how you do it, is good therapy. At least I find that to be the case. Well, that's all I want to talk about today was the trends for 2025 in basically fiber arts, knitting, crocheting, weaving. All of them are coming together. All of them are marrying in together. And I am really, really excited. Thanks so much for joining me. If you're just joining me, wow, I'm so glad that you're here. We do so much on this channel. We're going to continue on with Project Welcome Home. If you don't know what that is, check out the playlist on my channel, Project Welcome Home, and you can see what we did in 2024. We're basically making granny squares, and then we're making them into blankets, and we're giving them to our assisted living friends and residents, assisted living, and now it's expanded to memory care and also skilled nursing. So if you want to be a part of that, check out that playlist. You can see everything leading up to it, and then even the culmination of the last video that we gave out the blankets, which was very heart-wrenching, very heartwarming, I guess I should say, and tear-jerking for sure. Anyways, but thank you so much for watching. We're going to be talking about yarns and whips and ways to use it up and just reviews and things like that. So, and we have fun. We don't take ourselves too seriously. We have a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching. This is Kimberly with Knit for Brains. And as always, I'll see you soon.